Hey, good morning and welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Audit Subcommittee of this interim. Will Mr. Crossman please call the roll?
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Hammond. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
And Chair Howdigi.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. A special thank you to all of the state agency representatives that are participating in the meeting today. A couple of important housekeeping items before we begin. For those individuals on Zoom, including our legislative members, this chat feature is only to be used for communication with BPS for technical assistance. It is not to be used for any communication between members or presenters or to ask any other questions. Again, only for technical assistance from BPS. Members, please keep your cameras on throughout the committee meeting. This will help us ensure that we have a quorum. For members and presenters, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. This will help reduce the background noise. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone, because we are still in a virtual setting, public comment can be made 4 different ways. We will be taking public comment at the beginning of the meeting, as well as the last agenda item at the end of the meeting. The 4 different ways in which the public can participate in public comment is by dialing in at 669-900-6833 and entering the meeting ID 813-8576-6575, followed by the pound sign. You may also if you wish, you can email your public comment to lcaudit@lcb.state.nv.us. Public comment may also be mailed to the Audit Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada 89701, or by faxing your public comment into 775-684-6435. As always, this meeting will be recorded and will be made available on the legislature's website. Before we begin today's meeting, I would like to take a moment to say it's an honor to chair this committee. Audit is probably not most people's favorite word. It's probably their least, but audits are necessary to make sure government is transparent, accountable, and constantly improving. I want to thank the members who are serving on this committee, the subcommittee staff, IT, and BPS, who are making this virtual meeting possible, and a special thank you to the entire Legislative Audit Division who go out and perform the audits that allow our state government to operate at a higher level of efficiency. So on behalf of this committee, we thank you for your work. Okay, committee members, let's go ahead and move on to our first agenda item. BPS, could we check to see if we have any callers on for public comments?
Thank you so much, Chair Howdigi. To provide public comment at this time, please press *9 in your Zoom window to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide public comment at this time, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 612, you are unmuted and may proceed. Once again, caller with the last 3 digits, 612, you are unmuted and may begin.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Howdigi and members of the Audit Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Dave Doyle. My public comment today pertains to Section 5 of the agenda, Review of Government and Private Facilities for Children. Currently, I serve as the Nevada Chapter Chair of the Family Focused Treatment Association. The FFTA's main goal is to promote best practice, high quality standards, and promote positive outcomes for youth in therapeutic foster care. I'm also the director of Eagle Quest, one of the agencies being reviewed today. Most importantly, I'm a dedicated foster parent in Clark County and have been over the last 19 years. I'm deeply invested in the child welfare system throughout our state, and I would greatly appreciate you taking time to hear my public comment. Over the last 10 years, I've developed a positive working relationship with our LCB reviewers. While I acknowledge the last 2 years have been unprecedented times for Nevada, I'd like to put on record that the 2021 review or summary of findings process being discussed today was highly concerning. First and foremost, providers were never given a written report of the findings on their respective agency, nor were they given a chance to respond in writing. When providers reached out to the LCB, they were told the report was not public information. I ask all of you, if the intent of the audit review is to promote positive change, shouldn't we be sharing the written findings timely so providers can make the necessary changes and improvements to benefit the vulnerable children they serve? A short verbal debriefing of general findings is simply not enough, especially when the review occurred approximately 14 months ago. Another matter in which I would appreciate your consideration would be to change the definition of facility, which this review utilizes. Do we really want non-staffed foster homes with parents to be looked at the same as a true facility such as Alco, NYTC, or Caliente? We may be losing an incredible amount of resources and potential foster parents because the expectations demands of this review. It is important to understand therapeutic foster homes have multiple masters. While DCFS and DFS are understandably pushing for normalcy for their kids in care, LCB is reviewing us on near hospital-like standards. This creates undeniable confusion for the foster parent who's desperately trying to please both entities. Please note, we are not opposed to audits or reviews. We just would appreciate them being more indicative of what we do and who we are, as we are not facilities, nor are our agencies licensed or foster homes are. Just our foster homes are. In addition, we are already audited by DCFS, DFS, Medicaid, etc. FFTA would love to be involved in revising the LCB review process as it pertains to therapeutic foster care. My last point. Lastly, given the time in which this review was facilitated amidst the pandemic, I would encourage everyone to offer providers a degree of grace. This was an incredibly challenging time for all of us. Obviously, safety issues should not be ignored, nor should they never be. But if there was a few missing signatures mentioned in this review, please be compassionate and understanding. We were first responders when few or no other agencies were in the field. We went out to our homes physically because safety could not be ensured virtually. We were the first responders in the behavioral healthcare industry, and I would greatly appreciate that being noted. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate your time and consideration. That concludes my public comment.
Thank you for calling in and for your public comment. Broadcast, next caller, please.
Thank you, Chair. If you've recently joined the meeting and would like to provide public comment at this time, please press *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. And Chair Howdigy, the public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you so much. Okay, committee members, that moves us on to our next agenda item number 3, selection of the vice chair of the audit subcommittee. I would like to continue with the tradition of this committee. The chair has always been from one house and the vice chair from the other house, and I would like to continue that through this interim. Seeing that the chair is from the assembly, I would like to make a recommendation that we nominate vice chair to be Senator Marilyn Dondero Loop. So if the committee would be okay with that, I will take a motion to approve.
Chair?
Yes.
I would, thank you for calling on me. I would like to make a motion that Senator Dondero Loop serves as vice chair of the Legislative Commission's Audit Subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Miller. We have a motion by Assemblywoman Miller. Do we have a second? Thank you so much, Assemblymember Dickman. We have a second from Assemblymember Dickman. We can go ahead, since we are doing visual, let's just go ahead and proceed with a hand vote. So all those in favor, please raise your hand for aye. I'm going to go into my grid view so I can see everyone's hands. Looks like the motion passes unanimous. Oh, well, I apologize. Before we take the vote, I should have asked if there was any discussion from the members, any discussion on the motion before you. Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and redo that vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Before we move on to agenda item 4, I would like first to consider a motion to accept certain 6-month reports under agenda item 7, where the audit division does not have questions regarding implementation of the audit recommendation. This would include agenda items 7A through agenda items 7F, and would allow a number of the agency representatives to leave the meeting now. The remaining items, agenda items 7G through agenda items 7J, would be taken in that order. Mr. Crossman, would you like to make any remarks before a motion is considered?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. At times, agencies are able to fully implement all of the audit recommendations to our satisfaction before we present the 6-month reports to the Audit Subcommittee. In these cases, then, as you mentioned, we have no further questions for the agencies. I will note that in agenda item 7B, which is the 6-month report on the Department of Veterans Services, our letter did indicate there was one recommendation that was partially implemented, but was expected to be fully implemented this month, and we were able to actually confirm full implementation yesterday on that item, and therefore do not have any questions for them. So based on these circumstances, as you mentioned, the subcommittee may wish to accept the 6-month reports, and I'll just quickly run through those items. 7A is the Public Employees Benefits Program Contract Management. 7B is the Department of Veterans Services. 7C is the Office of the State Controller Unclaimed Property Program. 7D is the Department of Public Safety Records and Communications and Compliance Division, Information Security, Servers, Operating System and Database Application Software. 7E is the Public Employees Benefits Program, Information Security, Operating System and Database Application Software. And 7F is the Department of Business and Industry, Office of the Nevada Attorney for Injured Workers. And with that, I turn it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. And committee members, would any of you like any of these items pulled for review? If not, I would accept a motion to approve the 6-month reports under agenda items 7A through 7F. Assemblymember Dickman, I see you have your hand up.
I was just wondering, weren't there some questions in F that the auditors had? It seems like a lot of the issues did not meet the audit recommendations.
Mr. Crossman, I believe 7F, all of the recommendations were met, correct?
For the record, Dan Crossman, yes, all of the recommendations were considered to be fully implemented through our review process.
Because a number of these say partially implemented in the report I have.
For the record, Dan Crossman, sorry, Chair to Assemblywoman Dickman. On the front page of the letter, we include a summary of the recommendations as reviewed by the Governor's Finance Office, the Division of Internal Audits. At the time that they review these reports, they will provide us a status as of that time. Subsequent to that, and some time has passed, at that point, that was October 9th of 2021, when those statuses that you see on the front of the letter. But subsequent to that, progress has been made, and those have been considered fully implemented at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblymember Dickman, and thank you, Mr. Crossman. And Mr. Crossman, please feel free to go directly through members for all future and this meeting as well. Okay, members, any other questions regarding any of the items before us, 7A through 7F? I don't see any hands up, so if somebody would like to make a motion to approve the 6-month reports under agenda items 7A and 7F.
So moved.
To approve.
Okay, it looks like I'm not sure who said that first. Was that somebody? Vice Chair. Okay.
I was first, but I said it.
I will take a first from Assemblymember Dickman and a second from Vice Chair Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. I'm going to move over to my grid view to make sure I see everyone's hands up. Okay, looks like all members are in favor, so motion passes. Thank you so much. Okay, members, moving right along into agenda item 4. But before we do, I'd like to thank the state representatives here from those 6 agencies who were here and ready to answer any questions. And you're more than welcome to stay and watch us and be a part of the rest of the meeting if you'd like. Okay, members, agenda item number 4, the presentation of the audit reports. Mr. Crossman, would you like to provide brief remarks about the audit process before we begin diving into the reports?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. Under Agenda Item 4, we do have 3 performance audit reports today to present. These reports were kept confidential until presented to the Audit Subcommittee today per statute. Copies of these reports will be available on our website following the meeting. I'd like to thank my team as well as the state agencies that worked to complete this work during what was definitely a unique and challenging and difficult period of time. We appreciate the cooperation of the agencies and working with us as we work to do our job and help them to find ways to improve within their agencies. And with that, Chair, I'll turn it back to you to introduce the first report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Okay, members, our first report under Agenda Item 4A is the Department of Corrections Use of Force. I believe we have Audit Supervisor Eugenia Alara and Chief Deputy Legislative Auditor Shannon Rydell here to present the audit report.
Yes, good morning, Chair Howdeggy and committee members. For the record, my name is Eugene Alara, Audit Supervisor. I am here today to present the Department of Corrections Use of Force audit, beginning with background information on page 2. The department's total expenditures for fiscal year 2021 were about $371 million. As of January 2022, the department had 2,236 filled positions and a vacancy rate of nearly 25%, which was almost double the rate from December 2020. During fiscal year 2021, inmates were housed at 17 facilities throughout the state. The inmate population has been steadily declining over the past 5 years and was just over 11,000 inmates on March 31st, 2021. Although the inmate population has been in decline, the percentage of inmates with violent convictions has been increasing. Exhibit 1 on page 3 shows a 5-year analysis of the inmate population, and Exhibit 2 shows a 5-year analysis of the inmate population with violent offenses. The bottom of page 3 notes while a majority of inmates have violent criminal histories, most are not involved in violent incidents during their incarceration. Only about 19% of the inmate population in 2020 had a history of institutional violence. Exhibit 3 on the top of page 4 provides a breakdown of the inmates with a history of institutional violence during 2020. Continuing on the middle of page 4, the scope of our audit included a review of the department's processes over use of force activities from January 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2020. Our audit objective was to evaluate the department's processes over use of force, reporting, and certain related activities. Page 5 begins the first chapter discussing our audit findings. In the middle of page 5, we note inmate grievances alleging excessive use of force were not always reviewed or addressed timely. Inmates must use the grievance process to address any tort or claim related to their confinement. Grievances are the first step in the legal process before filing a lawsuit. On the bottom of page 5 and continuing on page 6, we tested 20 use of force grievances from a population of 83 and found that 13 of the 20 had no evidence of review by the Inspector General's office. 3 of these inmates had been paroled without their grievances being reviewed. The remaining 7 were reviewed untimely, taking an average of 164 days. Department regulation requires the IG's office complete the review within 90 days of referral. On the bottom of page 6 and continuing to page 7, we noted grievances alleging excessive use of force were not efficiently screened by the institutions before referring to the IG's office. Screening is necessary to ensure resources are utilized efficiently on grievances warranting further investigation. The middle of page 7 begins our discussion regarding use of force review panels. The panels are necessary to determine if the use of force was justified and consistent with department policies, procedures, and training. Our testing revealed the department did not conduct a review panel for 9 of the 25 use of force incidents we reviewed. Additionally, for 10 incidents, the department did not complete the review timely. On average, it took 3 months for the completion of these reviews, and 1 review took 13 months. Department regulations require review panels be completed within 20 or 45 days, depending on the severity of the incident. Pages 8 through 11 contain our analysis of 100 use of force incidents occurring between January 1st, 2019 and March 31st, 2020. Exhibit 4 on the top of page 9 provides a breakdown of incidents for 2020. The remainder of page 9 breaks down the mental health status, gang affiliation, and history of institutional violence for the 165 inmates involved in our 100 incidents review. Page 10 describes the types of activities that cause the use of force incidents we analyzed. The primary factor causing a use of force incident was inmate-on-inmate violence. Exhibit 5 on the top of page 11 provides a sample of some of the 100 incidents we reviewed. A complete list can be found in Appendix A beginning on page 23. The remainder of page 11 lists our recommendations regarding use of force, grievance investigations, and review panels. Turning to page 17. We begin our chapter related to administrative functions of the department. The middle of page 12 begins our discussion regarding prospective correctional officers. We know prospective officers work in the department's facilities without proper training or supervision. Continuing on page 13, our testing revealed 4 of 20 prospective officers were assigned to work posts alone. Additionally, 6 prospective officers were assigned to work dedicated posts, normally requiring a second certified peace officer. Further, 4 prospective officers participated in use of force incidents against department regulations. Finally, the department did not develop an adequate department-wide field training program to train and supervise prospective officers working in its facilities. For purposes of this report, we define prospective officers as those employed with the department prior to completing academy training. While statute allows law enforcement agencies to use prospective officers for all of these functions, using them to perform duties of fully trained certified peace officers can be dangerous. The department discontinued use of prospective officers for direct inmate supervision in April 2021. On the middle of page 14 and continuing on page 15, we note department training was not adequately tracked. Furthermore, the department has not developed standardized training for the restraint chair. We reviewed the training files of 104 officers and found no documentation of pregnant inmate restraint training for 9 officers and staff. Additionally, 6 officers were issued tasers, 1 officer fired a blank shotgun round, and 2 officers used a restraint chair with no evidence their training was up to date. NAC 289 prohibits officers from using weapons unless their training is current. Beginning on page 15 and continuing through the top of page 17, we discuss the department's weapons administrative process. Specifically, we note the department's authorized weapons list was not up to date and contained some obsolete weapons. We found 212 of the 744 weapons located at the institution's armories were unauthorized and/or obsolete. An authorized weapons list is needed to ensure weapons reliability and quality, proper training, and for weapons tracking. At the bottom of page 17, we discussed the training provided at the department's academy did not align with 74 pistols used at the institutions. Training was out of alignment because a different model and/or caliber pistol was used at the academy than at some institutions. Specific model and caliber training is important to demonstrate the officer understands how to use the weapon properly and safely. Page 17 begins our discussion on the department's administrative regulations. The department uses restraint chairs at all major institutions, but has not developed an administrative regulation governing their use. Additionally, administrative regulations have not been updated for recent legislative changes related to certain law enforcement practices and for peace officer drug testing. Regulations do not address an officer or supervisor's duty to intervene to stop excessive use of force or prohibit placing a person in custody in a position which inhibits the ability to breathe. Regulations regarding officer drug testing after a use of force incident have also not been updated. Our recommendations to improve the department's oversight of prospective officers, training, and other administrative functions are listed on page 18. Continuing on page 19. We discussed that the department's use of force data is not accurate, complete, or reliable. Errors within the data caused the department's primary statistical report to understate the number of use of force incidents by as much as 26% during calendar years 2019 through 2021. Additionally, data regarding use of force review panels results was not collected as required by regulation. Our recommendations for improving the reliability of use of force data are listed on the bottom of page 20. Page 21, we note the department spent $192,000 on 71 body cameras, supporting hardware and licensing fees, but never implemented the program. An additional $26,500 will be incurred annually for licensing fees unless the program is terminated. Our recommendation regarding the body camera program is on page 22. Appendix A on page 23 provides more detail regarding the 100 use of force incidents we reviewed. Appendix B on page 30 shows the letter documenting legislatively requested information regarding the department's body cameras. Our audit methodology is located beginning on page 32 in Appendix C. The program's response to our audit recommendations is located in Appendix D on page 37. This concludes my audit presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alara. Members of the subcommittee, I do know that we have 4 members of the Department of Corrections with us today. I believe Mr. William Gatier, Charles Daniels, Brian Williams, and James Jones are here to answer any questions that we may have. As always, I will turn to the subcommittee first for any questions. Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair Howdiggy. I actually have 3 questions, if I may.
Yes, Assemblywoman Miller, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So my questions first, and again, to whomever from the department is able to answer. My first question would go back to page 7, I should say pages 5 through 7, about the lack of review of these excessive use of force complaints and grievances. And it's, again, it's really alarming to see the rate of grievances that were not reviewed properly or in a timely manner by the Inspector General or by the use of force review panel. And so my questions, while I see other recommendations that you have made for the department, my first question is, and I know that most people don't even realize that we have an Inspector General here in Nevada for the Department of Corrections. But my question is, who does the Inspector General report to?
Good morning, this is Christina Leathers, Assistant to the Director for the Nevada Department of Corrections. The Inspector General reports to the Director of the agency.
So the Inspector General, whose role is to be completely objective and non-biased, reports to the Director of the agency. Did I hear that correctly?
Christina Leathers for the record. Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, and when recommendations are made, and this would be more of a question to LCB, when recommendations are made toward an agency, is it just recommendations about like meeting certain benchmarks, or are recommendations ever made for actual statutory change?
Madam Chair, I can jump in and answer that. Dan Crossman for the record, Legislative Auditor. Our recommendations, because these are performance audits, could span various types of recommendations that would assist to fix any conditions that we identify that need some corrective action. In certain circumstances, we have made recommendations or suggestions to the legislature to consider a statutory change. Specific to this report, we do not have a recommendation specific to the alignment of the IG reporting directly to the department head. That's if that's Assemblywoman Miller, if where you were headed with that.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly where I was headed, because the model of an Inspector General should not be reporting to the actual person that they may be required to investigate. So that's my first concern there. My next question, when it comes to looking at, again, going into the lack of training for our correction officers. And again, I know that this has been a consistent and an ongoing issue. And my concern, of course, is that when we put individuals into the prisons and they're not properly trained or prepared, they themselves become vulnerable, as well as our inmates in some cases. And so the same question, because of lack of training, and I will also say staffing, I know adds to this. Has there been any concrete solutions? Because again, I'm seeing all this kind of develop this, ensure this, do this, but I don't see actual dates or benchmarks. And the NRS that's referenced that actually allows peace officers to be up there, to be in the role for a year without being certified by post. Again, I don't see a recommendation to change that either. I just see that it's in conflict of a practice that's been discontinued.
Assemblywoman Miller, for the record, this is Deputy Director Bill Gitter of the department. Regarding the training and the utilization of new officers that are pending the academy completion, in the past, the department utilized those officers as we were allowed to within statute and took the risk that they were working with trained officers side by side and helping them in learning how to do the job. It has inherent risks, and we stopped that practice in April of 2021. We reissued that as an official policy just 2 months ago or a month ago following the audit. We fully accept that criticism and have taken a position now that we no longer utilize prospective officers or probationary officers before the academy to conduct any direct operations with inmates. They're only allowed to do non-correctional or non-custody duties or to observe from controlled locations where they do not interact with inmates for their own safety and the safety of others.
Okay, so Deputy Director, I hear you saying that they're not working where they would be in direct contact with any inmate. They may be in an office, they may be, but they would, could you elaborate on that?
Yes, ma'am. So we no longer use them to work side by side with another officer in contact with inmates. They're only allowed to, they work for the training department. They're not assigned to our institutions until they complete the academy as a rule. In the scope of that training, the training department may deploy them to observe from a safe location, like a control room or elevated post, to watch officers perform their jobs. Or they may be with a field training officer or a supervisor instructor going through a class on how to conduct custody operations in a controlled environment, but only that.
Okay, thank you. Because again, we are concerned about the safety of both our officers and our inmates as well. And my final question, Chair Howdige, is that on page 21, where it says the department spent $192,000 on body cameras that had not been implemented. Again, I see the recommendation says develop and implement a plan. So these recommendations, while from the programming standpoint, are, represent what needs to occur. Again, I'm not seeing benchmarks. I don't see dates of implementation that they need to be implemented. And I also don't see, so what happens if they don't? So in this case, which is a very quantifiable, very concrete goal. So if they do not, first, when is the date where, the date that, okay, this is the date that this must be implemented. And if they do not, then what happens to the $192,000? Is that reverted back to the state budget? Does the department still have the ability to utilize those funds? What happens if they don't implement these recommendations?
Assemblywoman Miller, through the chair. This is Eugene Alera, Audit Supervisor. To answer the question, the funds have already been spent on the body cameras. The cameras potentially are obsolete, so we left our recommendation very vague. So if they can get the cameras up and running, we would prefer they do that. But if they don't, they're either going to have to sell them or lose some of the money and recoup it, you know, through sale, or just lose all of the money because it's already been spent.
And so is that a process that we would also have, that would also be monitored, or is this something that we're just trusting the department to do? And also, again, when is the date that we expect this to occur or begin?
For the record, Eugene Alera, Audit Supervisor. They have 60 days to come up with a plan. And usually by 6 months, when they come back around for the 6-month report, we generally expect the recommendations to be making progress. But we do have a process in place where we monitor through the internal audit, and also we will be a part of the follow-up.
Okay, I'll just leave my questions at that. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Chair Howdiggy.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Miller. And Assemblywoman Miller, remember there is the 6-month review that brings them before the audit subcommittee again too. And as you saw, more than half of the state agencies have completed their recommendations from the audit division, and there's a handful that were still had some recommendations to be completed that we'll be reviewing later on in this meeting. So I hope that in 6 months we get to dismiss the Department of Corrections and hope that they have their 18 recommendations completed. You did touch on a lot of the questions that I had. I want to go to the other members to see if there's any questions. Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wondered if the department could talk a little bit about, are the issues that are being addressed here, how much of that has to do with staffing shortages? And how short are you on staff?
This is Deputy Director Bill Gitter for the record. Well, our staffing shortages are significant. They range from 11% at one institution to as high as 55% at the most challenged institution. Statewide, both custody and non-custody personnel are approaching the 25% mark in vacancies. As I said, some of our institutions are significantly more challenged than that. And that played a significant role in many of the issues that were highlighted in the audit. I'd like to say that we both respect and accept the audit findings, and we're working hand in hand with the recommendations from the auditors to fix those problems. Many of the audit's findings have been assigned for review within 60 days with an affirmative plan that will be put in place to resolve those issues.
So it's probably going to be difficult to implement until you get more staff, I would expect.
Again, Deputy Director Bill Gitter for the record, yes, ma'am, it is going to be challenging, but we accept them, and there's no room to fail here in that regard. We're going to spend the time and effort to get it done and get it done right. Many of the audit findings had to do with system problems, complexities that were inadequately addressed. If an inmate complains of a possible excessive or unnecessary use of force through a regular grievance system, then the people who handle the regular grievance system are not the custody officers or custody personnel that normally participate in an event where somebody makes an at-the-moment claim of such abuse. We didn't link those two systems together well enough so that they were going to be adequately reported and turned over to the Inspector General's office. But we've closed that loop and fixed that link, and that's our fix for that process. Staffing had an absolute impact on that. We really don't have any turnover right now. All we have are losses, and training person after person after person to fill those gaps, make those links is challenging. You're absolutely right, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Deputy Director Gitter, I know you had mentioned that staffing shortages are an issue, but you guys have a 25% vacancy rate, which is double from December 2020, as it says in the report. Why aren't those positions filled?
Well, ma'am, Deputy Bill Gitter, for the record, the long and short of that is that our salaries and benefits aren't competitive, so we can't hire personnel.
Okay, and then I'm going to go to Vice Chair. Vice Chair, do you have any questions before? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. Assemblywoman Miller did cover a lot of what I wanted to touch on, so I'm not going to ask the same questions, but I do kind of want to add in. I know you had mentioned that as of April 2021, you had stopped using non-post certified officers in the capacity that you were using them. Now they're just in administrative offices or observing. But I mean, what's to guarantee that you won't go back to those practices of using them if staffing shortage continues to be an issue?
This Deputy Director Bill Gitter, for the record, thank you for the question. Well, we've made it an official policy. We're proposing it as a change to the administrative regulation, which will go before the Board of Prison Commissioners for approval. And at that time, it will become permanent department policy.
Okay, and then as far as one of the other items that came out of the report was the use of obsolete firearms. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, if you made a request in your executive budget for $200,000 for body cameras that were never going to be used, why wasn't there a request made instead for upgraded equipment? Or why the use of obsolete firearms, which again, to Assemblywoman Miller's point, I mean, it's about for the safety of everyone involved, not just inmates, but the officers who are handling these weapons as well. We want to make sure we're protecting everyone within the Department of Corrections.
For the record, this is Deputy Director Bill Gitter. Well, of course, the body camera issue and the weapons issues are two separate issues. Regarding the body cameras, they were purchased for with good intention to put into our system, which helps deter bad behavior on the job and also helps to capture evidence for us in use of reviewing those situations. Unfortunately, we did not do an adequate job of planning the infrastructure needs to place such a system in function. It was a much larger project than just buying the cameras and putting them together. Over time, when they came on board, there was good intentions to make those work, and there were small programs that were tried to put them in place. By the time we reached the point where we thought that could be done, the infrastructure, we just couldn't come up with the infrastructure to make it work adequately. So that's what happened. Now we're restudying this procedure. As Mr. Alara said, these cameras are older now and perhaps obsolete. We do have a committee that's working with them, working on that process right now. Within 60 days, they'll report back to my office on whether it's possible to put them in service. That's the option we want. Or if it's not fiscally feasible because of the obsolete nature, and we'll have to try to sell them off appropriately through the system so we can recoup some of the costs. We want those systems in play. It is important to get those surveillance systems mobile, as well as our fixed surveillance systems always functioning and providing overwatch for us. So that's the camera issue. Regarding the obsolete weapons, when we transitioned from lethal overwatch, using lethal weapons in our control room to maintain security on our tiers, in the housing areas, to less lethal options in November of 2016, we had to remove like the shotguns, place those in our armories for later disposal, and then purchase less lethal weapons to provide the overwatch so that we can maintain the safety on those tiers for the inmates who live there and the officers who work there. Those weapon systems, the shotguns and other systems that became obsolete in the same way, were left in those, so they were out of service and they were safely in the arms rooms, but they weren't destroyed or disposed of in a timely manner. We also had other weapons that over the years that were collected for either for training purposes or through an initiative to add them to our armory that didn't happen. And they were collected and stored and maintained in the arms room, but not used in service. Now we've scrubbed through those weapons and we've disposed of the shotguns. In addition, we transitioned starting 2 years ago from, and forgive me, I'm not going to state the exact the exact nomenclature of this particular weapon system because it's a security issue. But we transitioned from one lethal weapon system to another for fiscal reasons because it was a similar platform that was cheaper to operate over the long term. And as we did that, kind of unevenly over the department because of fiscal issues and opportunities, we put that weapon system into place, into use, and then pulled the older weapon system out and stored them in our arms room. Once again, they stayed there and they weren't turned in rapidly or were taken care of in a timely manner. And we're focused on that now, reducing everything in our armory, getting rid of everything in our armory that isn't specifically authorized by our administrative regulation.
Okay. Yeah, that answers my question about the obsolete, right? And thank you for answering that, Deputy Director, the obsolete weapons. But one of the other finding was the unauthorized weapons. There was 171 weapons being used for not authorized weapons list. It's on page 16 of the audit report.
Deputy Director Gitter, for the record. So those weapons that are not specifically authorized by AR 412 are being disposed of. And as over the years, weapon systems were purchased locally for in an initiative to try out a new weapon system or to do training, and those weapon systems were just maintained in those areas and they weren't disposed of in a timely manner.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the committee members. Any final questions? Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank you, Deputy Director, for being here to answer our questions and the other members of the Department of Corrections. Oh, I did want to touch on one thing. The Department of Public Safety has implemented body cameras. Have you reached out to that department at all to see how they put their body cameras into use as maybe as a plan or a model that you could use with your department?
Deputy Director Bill Gitter, for the record, yes, ma'am, we have. We did that initially back in 2016. The committee is talking with them again, specifically about the legacy systems that we now use, because I think that they're in use by DPS or similar systems. So yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. And again, I want to thank you. And I appreciate the work that happens at the Department of Corrections. One of our colleagues is a retired correctional officer at the legislature. So we know how hard the work is and we appreciate the work you guys do. And I think at the end, all we want to do is keep everyone safe at the Department of Corrections on both ends. Thank you. I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. Committee members, if there are no other questions, we can move on to our next report. Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Chair, Chair Howdy.
Yes.
This is Dan Crossman for the record.
Oh, I need to take action
on that one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Okay, committee members. I would like to take a motion to approve the reports that was presented to us.
I move to approve the report that was presented.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve from Senator Dondero Loop. It looks like I have a second from Assembly Member Dickman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those members in favor of approving the report, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Looks like all members are in the aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. I appreciate that. Okay, now, and I'd like to thank Mr. Alara for the presentation as well of the reports. Okay, members, it looks like agenda item 4B is the audit report on the Department of Health and Human Services, the Division of Child and Family Services, management of the maltreatment reports, and child health. We have Deputy Legislative Auditor Scott Jones and Audit Supervisor Tammy Goetz here to present the report.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Audit Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Scott Jones, Deputy Legislative Auditor. If you could direct your attention to page 1, I will begin my presentation with some background information. The introduction of the audit report includes a summary of the major child and youth welfare functions of the Division of Child and Family Services. On page 2, Exhibit 1 shows division revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 2020. Pages 3 through 5 outline the process by which the division's Child Protective Services section receives alleged reports of maltreatment and how these are screened in for investigation by the division when necessary. Exhibit 2 on page 3 shows rural child maltreatment reports received from 2016 to 2020. And Exhibit 3 on page 5 depicts a summary of the division's process for reviewing maltreatment reports. Pages 5 through 6 outline the division's process for ensuring children in state custody receive required health services. On page 6, we describe our audit scope and objectives. The scope of our audit included a review of the division's activities for the 18-month period of January 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020, including previous years for case management activities. Our audit objective was to evaluate whether the division adequately ensures the safety and welfare of children for certain division activities, including maltreatment report response and the supervision of medical care of children in state custody. On page 7, we begin our findings and recommendations. We found the division did not completely process certain maltreatment reports and was unaware that some reports lacked supervisory review. Unprocessed reports included serious allegations such as physical abuse, parental drug abuse, domestic violence, and child self-harm. As described on page 8, we found 35 reports identifying alleged victims, perpetrators, and/or maltreatment incidences that did not receive complete or timely supervisory review until we notified the division of the oversight. State law requires the division to conduct an evaluation of reports of alleged abuse and neglect no later than 3 days after the report is received to determine whether an investigation is warranted. The division did not comply with this requirement for these 35 reports. Due to concerns that child safety could be in question, we immediately assessed all unprocessed reports and identified 18 reports in which the alleged victims were potentially at risk. We promptly notified the division of these 18 reports. The division confirmed these reports had not received proper oversight and subsequently assessed the safety of the children involved. After assessing all unprocessed reports, we noted the case histories associated with 11 maltreatment reports showed that children were exposed to additional risk of abuse and neglect because of inadequate or untimely report processing by the division. Additionally, a consequence of the division failing to timely process reports was that the division delayed reporting alleged crimes against children to law enforcement. At the bottom of page 8, we indicate that the division did not always have adequate report record-keeping practices. Of 133 reports assessed from 2019, 11 were inadequately documented. Examples of inadequate report documentation included insufficient or inadequate documentation of alleged incidents, perpetrators, victims, or division actions in response to reports. On page 9, we state that some reports were deleted from Unity, Nevada's statewide automated child welfare information system, even though they contained important incident-related information. 3 of 133 reports assessed from 2019 were deleted from Unity, despite the fact that they contained important information regarding alleged victims or instances of abuse and neglect. On page 10, the division had the opportunity but did not complete necessary investigations in response to allegations of abuse and neglect for 7 of 133 reports received in 2019. Reports not investigated by the division included allegations of neglect, child abuse, inadequate shelter, failure to protect, threatened violence against the child, potential self-harm, and domestic violence. Critical reasons for the division to investigate maltreatment allegations is to protect children and to restore caregivers to their protective role and responsibility. The causes of these maltreatment reports not being investigated were judgmental error and supervisory non-compliance with policy. Not investigating these reports put children at additional risk of abuse and neglect. Continuing to page 11, the division does not analyze Medicaid claims of children in state custody for injuries or medical assessments indicative of abuse and neglect. Both state and federal entities have evidenced the child welfare benefits of utilizing Medicaid claims to identify potential incidents of child abuse and neglect. We queried 2018 and 2019 Medicaid claims of children in state custody for diagnoses codes indicative of possible abuse and neglect. Out of 62,162 Medicaid claims, 22 claims contain these specified diagnoses codes. For all but one claim, the division was aware of the injuries and had previously assured the safety of the children. This analysis did not include children in state custody in Clark and Washoe counties. However, expanding this analysis statewide would provide additional opportunities to identify potential maltreatment. In Exhibit 4, we provide the general protocol for our identification of Medicaid claims that indicate possible abuse and neglect. On page 12, we provide 6 recommendations to improve processing of maltreatment reports. On page 13, we describe that the division was lacking in its monitoring of health care for children in state custody. Many children in state custody in 2019 did not receive required preventative health and dental care. As shown in Exhibit 5 on page 14, 29% of children in state custody did not receive required preventative health care, and 28% did not receive any preventative dental care. Caseworkers and supervisors did not adequately ensure that children receive required health care. When children do not receive required health care, they are at an increased risk of preventable illness. Page 14 describes for 80% of children in state custody for all of 2019, the division did not maintain complete health records in unity. Maintaining complete records of health care for children in state custody facilitates continuity of care and supports the welfare of children. Page 15 shows that the division's prescribed healthcare schedule for children in state custody was not updated to align with Medicaid's medical standards. Because policy does not meet federal requirements and American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations, children could be receiving inadequate healthcare. On page 16, we provide 5 recommendations to improve the division's oversight of healthcare services for children in state custody. To conclude, the report appendices begin on page 17. Appendix A is our audit methodology, and Appendix B is the division's response. As indicated on page 26, the division accepted all 11 recommendations. Chair and members of the audit subcommittee, that completes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Committee members, we do have, I believe it is Carla Delgado with the Division of Child and Family Services here to answer any questions that we may have. I'm going to start with committee members first. Committee members, any questions for the Division of Child and Family Services? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, Assemblymember Miller, do you want to get questions started, or would you?
Chair Howdy, please continue and then come back to me.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. And I do want to start, I want to ask Mr. Jones a question really quick. Mr. Jones, do you know if other states use Medicaid claims to assess potential abuse? Is that a common practice? Do you know?
Scott Jones, Deputy Legislative Auditor for the record. So in our preliminary analysis, we actually reviewed a statewide audit that was in Massachusetts, where they did an assessment similar to the one that we did. We patterned ours based on Massachusetts, and they were able to see great benefits. There was also a federal report that completed a similar assessment from the Office of Inspector General that showed the benefits of this assessment at this point. So that's how we based our analysis.
Okay, thank you. No, it seems like a great idea. And I have, Ms. Delgado, have you guys used this in the past to review potential or identify potential abuse? Have you used Medicaid claims in the past? Oh, Ms. Delgado, I can, if you would please get closer to your microphone. I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you. If you could get closer to your microphone. I'm sorry, is that committee members? Is it just me, or is everyone having trouble hearing Ms. Delgado?
Okay.
Seems to be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. If you could. Ms. Delgado, I'm not sure if you want to try calling in, but.
This is broadcast.
Yes.
Ms. Delgado, if you could you go to your microphone in the lower left corner? There's a little caret, and try to switch between the microphones. Try that first.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay. Great. Carla Delgado for the record. We have not used Medicaid here in Nevada to assess our child abuse.
Okay, and okay, perfect. And is this the first time this has been a recommendation for your division?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then I mean, as you know, the audit reports are kept confidential, and I know there's responses, but I mean, could you walk us through a little bit about just, I mean, the first question I have was regarding, let me get to my. So it looks like it was under the children exposed to additional maltreatment. It was on page 8 of the report. I know that one of the items that I highlighted was a delayed reporting on alleged crimes of sexual abuse against children to law enforcement. Do you have a specific number of how many reports were delayed for that specific category? Oh, Miss Delgado, I'm so sorry, but we can't hear you. I'm gonna ask, I mean, is it possible that maybe you call in? I know I'm having extreme trouble hearing you, and if I'm having trouble hearing you, I'm assuming other members and the members of the public who are watching as well are.
Ms. Delgado, this is broadcast. If you could, you can switch to phone audio underneath the microphone button, and it will give you instructions for how to call in. Ms. Delgado, this is broadcast. You'll need to unmute on your phone by pressing *6.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you so much. We appreciate you working with us.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Carla Delgado, for the record, I do not have that number handy right now, but I can, submit it after this meeting to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I just want to go back. I'm just going to start from the beginning. I know that that the report had identified that there was a lack of, I guess, review of the rural maltreatment of children reports that were coming in. But I also see on the graph on page 3 that it looks like there was a drop in the amount of reports that the division was receiving. And so I just need help understanding if there was a significant drop. It looks almost like from 4,200 at the height to 3,600 received in 2020. Why, if there was a significant drop in the amount of reports received, there was a significant amount of reports that weren't reviewed.
Carla Delgado, for the record. I know that one of the reasons for the significant drop was when Nevada went to the COVID-19 pause. And so the children were not being seen at schools, and teachers are one of our biggest reporters and have eyes on those children. And so I know that that's one of the drops, but I do want to defer over to Lori Jackson, who's here with me, and she can expand on that.
Lori Jackson, Social Services Manager, for the record. Actually, the entire state saw a significant drop in child abuse reports. I think that, along with domestic violence reports, actually went up. Because children were not seen in doctors' offices, at schools, many of them were not outside even. They were not seen. So throughout the entire pandemic, there was a significant decrease in reports across actually the United States.
Okay, so there was a drop in the amount of reports that were received, but one of the audit findings was that from the reports that were received, they weren't processed properly, or there was a lack of review. So if we're seeing a reduction in the number of reports we're receiving, I mean, you would think that did staffing levels go down, or was there a reason why the reports weren't being reviewed if there was a drastic drop?
Lori Jackson, Social Services Manager for DCFS, for the record. One of the I think what you're speaking to in the report is that our information services system upgraded and changed our system a little bit right before the pandemic started. So that would have been 2019. And the report is referencing referrals. So calls that came in or that were beginning to be entered into our system as not being disclosed properly or reviewed properly.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. Okay, let me see. And then I do have another question on the reports that were deleted out of Unity. Could you talk a little bit about why those reports were deleted? What happens to the staff members who intentionally delete reports and why they would be deleted?
Laurie Jackson, Social Services Manager for the record. In the upgrade from our SACWA system, which is called Unity, so from Unity 2 to Unity 3, in that upgrade, we went to a cloud-based system. Within that system, there a couple of things happened, and we've worked with IS to since repair those. Reports that were entered that were not dispositioned were not all reports. What would happen is I would start a report, I might get more information, so I would go back to find it, couldn't find it, and then would start another one. So of the reports that were, technically, I think the word would be referral, that were deleted between the consent of myself and our information systems. Those reports didn't contain information of abuse or neglect. They were reports that they were started by a worker and had no other additional information in them. If that's clear.
Okay, thank you. And then if you could just also touch on I know that it was, I think 20, well, let me actually check that correct number. For the children who didn't receive the required health care, I know there was about 30% that had received no preventative health care and no preventative dental care. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, ma'am. Laurie Jackson, Social Services Manager, DCFS for the record. One of the challenges is our SACWA system in Unity. Again, that upgrade kind of occurred right before the pandemic started. And so one of the issues, I think, was more of a data entry than a lack of our clients or our children in our care receiving that care. We have since addressed that. We have asked our state oversight has updated the policy for healthcare for the periodicity table to be correct. We have had the community health nurses come to all of our offices and train all of our staff workers, because not all of our staff workers have children, and so would actually know those tables and those things that are necessary. And we've also worked with our foster care unit in order to address being more mindful of getting those records.
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say we IS to have a report that we can review monthly to make sure that no children slip through the cracks.
Thank you, and thank you for answering all the questions. I feel like most of the problems stemming from the upgrade to this Unity system, even like the lack of the reporting, the deleted files, and the preventative health care. When was Unity implemented again? Was it 20? Unity.
Sorry, Jackson, for the record, Unity itself was implemented in, I think, 2000, 2001. It has gone through several upgrades. So there was Unity 1, Unity 2. We are currently onto Unity 3, which is a cloud-based application, which is probably the extent of my technical knowledge.
Okay, and it was this upgrade, then you're saying that caused a lot of the issues.
It was, I think it was a combination of the upgrade and the windows not being used quite the same, and a lack of training to use those windows. So it was a little bit of the perfect storm, and we have since addressed that.
Okay. Members, any other questions for the division? Assemblymember Miller, please.
And thank you, Chair Howdigy, because this time you asked most of my questions. So I just want to go back to page 10 because there's something that keeps sticking out. It's a very alarming comment that's written in the audit. And it says, the last sentence on page 10, the causes of these maltreatment reports not being investigated were judgmental error and supervisory noncompliance with policy. So I see in the recommendations that there have been recommendations and there has been acknowledgement by the department as well about the lack of training and necessity for further training. And that can help with judgmental errors. Terms like non-compliance, supervisory non-compliance though, seems more intentional. And so that's a concern for me. But my question goes back to, I will take it to a more generalized approach, the same as with the Department of Corrections and having sensitivity, knowing that, again, just like our people that work in corrections, our people that work in child welfare and safety and foster care and CPS, that often staff is overworked and underpaid. And so I just would like to but yet all enter this profession with the right intention, which is to serve the community and protect our people and our children. So with this, someone speak to what do the caseloads look like? What does staffing look like in the department? If you would like to just briefly acknowledge pay so we could get a handle of and turnover as well. So staffing, turnover, pay, and caseloads, if you could just give a brief idea. And also if any of that is connected to, again, some of these concerns identified through the audit.
Laurie Jackson, Social Services Manager for DCFS, for the record. Thank you for the question. Yes, I do believe it's much like the Department of Corrections, our staffing levels at this point in time and have never fallen below 22% vacancy rate. We're currently at about a 36 to 37% vacancy rate. We are spread out throughout the state. So where one office may be staffed, our Elko office, Winnemucca offices are chronically understaffed. So I think that does, if that answers your question, I think that does have a huge impact on workloads. Our caseload sizes do fluctuate, but for the most part, most of our caseworkers are carrying probably about between 27 to 33 cases, depending on the office. Some of our offices, unfortunately, because they are so small, have to carry a mix of CPS cases and permanency cases, and occasionally adoption cases, so they don't have the ability to transfer because another unit is understaffed. Here in Carson, we are currently down 7 workers, and we cover the Lyon, Douglas, and Carson counties, which are 3 of the largest counties within Nevada outside of Washoe and Clark. So I'm hoping that answers your question. Please ask again if I did not. Oh, and I think you asked about, there is a huge pay differential here in between the state and Washoe and Clark County. So I can speak to between here and Washoe, which is who we compete with for workers. The pay differential ranges between $14,000 for some of our lower paid workers up to almost $46,000 for the same job.
Right. Thank you for that. And I imagine there's not a differential necessarily in housing, because I know it's expensive there as well. Just one follow-up, Chair, if you could, just so we can so everyone can have an idea of what a more effective or manageable caseload would look like. You say 27 to 33 cases each. Is there any kind of professional standards or recommendations? What would the ideal caseload be?
Laurie Jackson, Social Services Manager for DCFS, for the record. The ideal caseload for our safety model, which the state is using, is between 15 and 18 children.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
I was on mute. Thank you, Assemblymember Miller, for those questions. I do have a question from Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wondered if we could go back for a second to page 8 where Chairwoman Howdiggy brought up the fact that the alleged crimes of sexual abuse against children was delayed in being reported. In one report, the delay was over 3 months, while another report was delayed for over a year. I mean, you can't help but wonder what might have happened to these children. And so my question would just be, once these changes are implemented, could this ever happen again?
Laurie Jackson, Social Services Manager for DCFS, for the record. We have created reports where we are checking to make sure that things our reports that are coming in are disposed timely, that they are within policy and procedure. We are also instituting our quality assurance unit does periodic reviews of all disposed reports that are not assigned for investigation to check and see if that they are within policy and procedure. If they have not so far found anything, but if they did, then we will provide training to that supervisor and oversight with a supervisor who has been maybe had a bit more experience.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember Dickman. Any members of the committee, any other questions? Okay, I want to thank you both for being here and answering our questions. I know that you guys have accepted the 11 recommendations from the audit division. It's like your 60-day corrective plan is due June 15th, and then the 6-month report to us from the audit division is going to be in December. With that, I want to thank you guys again for being here, and members of the committee, I would take a motion to approve the report.
Apologies. I move to accept the report. I was on mute.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
Have a second.
Have a second from Assemblymember Miller. Thank you, members. Any discussion on the motion before you? Okay, seeing none, please, all those in favor signify by raising your hand as an aye. Looks like the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, members, and thank you again both for being here today. I'm glad we overcame our technical challenges. Okay. Members, our next item is agenda item 4C. It's the audit report from the Department of Health and Human Services, the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, Information Security. We do have Deputy Legislative Auditor Christopher Gray here to present, and I believe Shirley Idle being him as well. Mr. Gray, are you with us?
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Audit Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Christopher Gray, Deputy Legislative Auditor. I'm here today to present the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy Information Security Audit. I'll begin my presentation with background information found on pages 1 and 2. The mission of the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy is, 1, to purchase and provide quality healthcare services to low-income Nevadans in the most efficient manner. 2, to promote equal access to healthcare at an affordable cost to the taxpayers in Nevada. 3, to restrain the growth of healthcare costs. And 4, to review Medicaid and other state healthcare programs to maximize potential federal revenue. The division administers both Nevada Medicaid and checkup programs. The Medicaid Management Information System, known as MMIS, is a computerized claims processing and information retrieval system that the Nevada Medicaid program must have to be eligible for federal funding. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services validate and certify state MMIS systems. Gainwell Technologies, also known as the fiscal agent, has been contracted to maintain and manage Nevada's MMIS. The scope of our audit covered the systems and practices in place during the fiscal year 2021. And our audit objective was to determine if the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy had adequate controls to ensure user access controls protected sensitive information and to monitor its MMIS change management process. Our findings begin on page 3, where we explain that the background investigation process at the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy could be strengthened. Specifically, 84 non-division state employees and 4 of 7 information technology contractors were given access to the MMIS system without verifying or documenting a background check had been completed. In addition, on page 4, 2 of 10 fiscal agent employees' user accounts were enabled before the division received background investigation results. One of those accounts had access to MMIS 12 days before a background check packet was submitted or approved. Moving on to page 5, all 6 newly hired division employees in 2021 did not receive a preliminary background investigation or submit their background investigation packet before they were given access to the MMIS. The average time the 6 employees had access to MMIS before receiving fingerprint background investigation results was approximately 37 days. Background investigations help reduce the risk that sensitive data will be accessed by disreputable individuals. The MMIS contains protected health information, which includes information about health status, provisions of health care, or payment for health care. As of July 2021, there were 711 user accounts allowing access to Nevada MMIS, including division and non-division state employees and fiscal agent employees. State security standards require that fingerprint-based background investigations be conducted on state employees and IT contractors who work for or provide IT services to the state. Although the division policies outlined a process for verifying contractors pass an appropriate background check before granting MMIS access, this process was not followed. Moving on to page 6, we have included 3 recommendations to improve controls on background investigations to help ensure that access to the MMIS is safeguarded. On page 7, we explain that the division does not actively manage MMIS user accounts. Specifically, the division does not ensure MMIS access is needed for non-division state employees. The division also does not ensure that user accounts of former state employees and its fiscal agent are disabled timely. And the division does not ensure documentation used to authorize MMIS access is complete or reviewed periodically. Accounts still valid after a user leaves an enterprise makes it easy for an external or internal threat actor to gain unauthorized access to enterprise data using valid user credentials. On page 8, it's noted that the state security standards indicate that access rights for every state system should be reviewed in the event of a change of access, whether by the termination of a contract, employment, or service. The division has a policy that requires IT staff to disable a user account within 24 hours of notification. However, this policy does not address timely notification of IT staff. In addition, the policy does not address reviewing user accounts to determine if access is still required. On page 9, we explain that the division does not properly document system access authorization or documentation was inaccurate on several of the security access request forms, which are used to grant access to MMIS. A security access request form contains details of an employee or a contractor requesting access to division resources. The division did not follow its documented procedure for MMIS account review, which is to complete roles and account status with the security access request form on file. To verify users in the system, the procedure also requires a routine reconciliation of the user roles and account state with the security access request form on file. On page 10, we have included 3 recommendations to improve the controls associated with MMIS user access management. On page 11 and 12, we explain that the division's MMIS enhancement process is effective in ensuring changes to the system are prioritized and completed. A documented change management plan is utilized and monitored. Proper management of this process helps ensure changes to the MMIS meet the needs of the project stakeholders and align with available resources. Our audit methodology begins on page 13 The agency's responses follow. And on page 19, we note that the Division of Healthcare Financing Policy accepted our 6 recommendations. That concludes the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. We appreciate you being here and presenting the report. Committee members, any questions? I know I just have 2, so I will go to you first. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Mr. Gray, I do have one question. I know that you, in 2 different places in the report, it said that 9 employees have not logged into MMIS since before June 2021. And then there was also 4, I think it looks like employees who were no longer, well, they were not employees, so they were no longer with the division, still had access. So for the 9 employees, do you know if they were, who hadn't logged in before 2021, if it was because their roles changed, so they no longer needed to access MMIS, and their, I guess, access just wasn't turned off by IT? Was that the case, or were they actual no?
Yes, in most cases, they had changed positions or changed roles, and they didn't warrant access, and so they didn't use it.
Okay, thank you. And I think just with information security being one of the most important topics right now, I know that because as the chair of Commerce and Labor, I've seen, privacy bills come before our committee over the last 2 sessions, and they increase in number. And my only question I have, I know we have quite a few people here from the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, is please, is there any concern of there being HIPAA violations? What kind of information do these people have access to, in addition to, I'm assuming names, date of birth, address, social security numbers, but then also billable healthcare services that they're receiving. So is there any HIPAA violations, and would we be in jeopardy of losing any federal dollars for being in violation of HIPAA policy, privacy rights?
Madam Chair, Jared Davies for the record, Information Security Officer for the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. I would say that we aren't at risk for HIPAA violations. As our fiscal agent, they are allowed access to that protected health information to perform their job duties on a regular basis. And so while their role may have changed, they would still have access to that system in other areas. They shouldn't be going in and looking for information that doesn't pertain to any duty that they're currently performing, but they do have access to it.
Okay, what about for the 4 non-employees that were no longer had a contract with the division?
In those instances, they had terminated their service with the fiscal agent, and we were not notified of it. And it wasn't until the audit occurred that we were made aware that they had left service.
Okay, and then, okay. Members, any other questions for the division? I know you've accepted the 6 recommendations and you have your the 60 days to create your corrective plan, but information security to me is just one of the most important things, because we all know someone who's been impacted by it, right? So I'm going to go to the members before we go for action. Members, any questions? Okay, Mr. Davies, it looks like we have no further questions for you. So with that, I will go to the members to look for a motion to accept the report. Looks like I have a first from Assemblymember Dickman. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I saw Ms. Miller's hand go up, so I'm going to give it to Ms. Miller. Assemblymember Miller with a second. Any discussion on the motion, members? I'm going to move into a gallery view so I can see everyone. Okay, members, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Assemblymember Miller, you okay? Okay, it looks like the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davies, for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, that actually concludes all of our items under agenda item 4. So we can move on to agenda item 5, which is a presentation of review of government and private facilities for children. I'm going to go to Mr. Crossman first for some brief remarks.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. One of our roles is to review governmental and private facilities for children on an ongoing basis, and then provide information to assist with legislative oversight. Ultimately, our goal is to help ensure adequate protection of children in these homes and facilities. These facilities that we do inspect are defined in statute, and that governs which facilities we go see. Our efforts in this area are to perform as many inspections as practical and as possible. You'll see this year we have 20 facilities that we did have the opportunity to review this year. The last couple of years, we have shifted more towards an inspection process rather than a longer, more thorough review. And the intent of that is to have the opportunity to get our eyes on as many facilities as possible with the limited resources we have. An inspection of a home or facility includes a review of policies and procedures, a review of certain files, as well as a physical inspection. And then we communicate the information and observations after these inspections. During the year, we've also made contact with all of the 59 facilities that are listed in our report that fall under our statutory authority. And that's part of our annual survey process. Furthermore, we review during the year complaints. This year, we reviewed more than 600 complaints that were submitted to us, and we then follow up with facilities when deemed appropriate. We've also worked closely with representatives from DCFS, as well as Washoe County Human Services Agency and the Clark County Department of Family Services throughout the year. I'll now turn the time over to Sandra McGurk, our audit supervisor, and she'll walk us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crossman, and thank you, Ms. McGurk, for being here with us.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Sandra McGurk, Audit Supervisor. I am here to present our governmental and private facilities for children, surveys, observations, and inspections report. Our work was conducted pursuant to the provisions of NRS 218G.570 through 218G.595, which requires us to determine if the facilities adequately protect the health, safety, and welfare of the children in the facilities, and whether the facilities respect the civil and other rights of the children in their care. On pages 1 through 5, we discuss background information and the type of work we completed. We completed inspections of 4 children's facilities and surveys and observations of 16 children's facilities. Surveys of children's facilities were conducted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and related restrictions, during which we did not perform on-site physical observations. However, after restrictions were lifted, we completed observations at most of the surveyed children's facilities. On page 6, we discuss our inspections of 4 children's facilities. At one facility, P6 Family Services, we identified various concerns regarding care of the children. Continuing on pages 6 and onto page 7, we discuss P6 Family Services. All 3 of P6 foster homes provide specialized foster care. Each home is licensed separately by Washoe County Human Services Agency. This was our second visit to one of P6 homes. At 2 of 3 P6 homes, we noted several issues that prompted us to question whether P6 adequately protected the children in its care. Some of these significant issues observed at the homes included human feces in a child's bedding and on the walls. The children's bathroom had mold. A child's bedroom did not have a bed, and cleaning supplies were unsecured. In addition, medication records were unsecured, incomplete, inaccurate, and required documentation was missing. We determined the homes did not meet minimum foster care standards established in statutes. Subsequent to our inspection, Washoe County closed one of the two homes we inspected. Continuing on page 8, we discuss 16 children's facilities that we surveyed and observed. However, at 4 of the 16 facilities, Tahoe House Family Services, Three Angels Care, Eagle Quest, and 180 Community Wellness Centers, we identified various concerns regarding care of the children. On page 8, we discuss Tahoe House Family Services, a home that provided specialized foster care, which was licensed by the state's Division of Child and Family Services. Some of the significant issues observed and noted at the home included medication records were incomplete, inaccurate, and required documentation was missing. A child's file did not contain evidence to support whether treatment services were provided, and the home was dirty and disorganized. In addition, there was no evidence to support whether significant events, including alcohol consumed by a child in the home, were communicated to a facilities licensing agency. We determined facility management did not meet minimum foster care standards established in statutes. Following our visit to the home, DCFS stopped placing children at Tahoe House and subsequently revoked its license. On page 10, we discuss Three Angels Care, a foster care agency. All 8 homes operated by Three Angels Care are licensed separately by Washoe County Human Services Agency to provide specialized care. This was our second visit to one of Three Angels Care homes. Some of the significant issues observed at each of the 3 homes included 2 unsecured prescription medication pills on the carpet of a child's bedroom. Several areas of the home were dirty, such as the children's bathrooms, and children's bedrooms contained empty snack wrappers, partially eaten food, and garbage. In addition, we observed pillows without pillowcases, a bed without a bed frame, overflowing laundry baskets, and disorganized piles of clothing in a closet. We determined the homes did not meet minimum foster care standards established in statutes. Following our visits to the homes, we contacted Washoe County to discuss our concerns. Washoe County issued a corrective action plan to one of the 3 homes we observed. On page 12, we discuss Eagle Quest, a foster care agency. All 58 homes operated by Eagle Quest are licensed separately by Clark County's Department of Family Services to provide specialized care. Some of the significant issues observed at the homes included incomplete medication records, unsecured tools, cleaning chemicals, and alcohol, and homes were dirty. Following our visits to the homes, we contacted Clark County to discuss our concerns. Clark County and Eagle Quest's management confirmed our concerns were addressed promptly. On page 13, we discuss 180 Community Wellness Centers, a foster care agency. All 5 of 180's homes are licensed separately by Clark County Department of Family Services to provide specialized foster care. Some of the significant issues observed at one of the homes included unsecured psychotropic and non-psychotropic medication, and the home smelled of marijuana. Following our visit to 180's home, we contacted Clark County to discuss our concerns. Clark County confirmed our concerns were addressed by facility management. Appendix A on page 15 contains a list of surveys, observations, and inspections we completed. Appendix B on pages 16 through 18 provides some background, population, and staffing information on 59 children's facilities in Nevada. That concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions the subcommittee may have. Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I would like to address some of the issues brought up by Mr. Doyle from Eagle Quest during public comment.
Yes, Ms. McGurk, please.
Thank you. First and foremost, our expectations of facilities are adjusted based on the types of facilities we observe and review. For example, level of security, staff to youth ratios, use of force, and Prison Rape Elimination Act. With respect to facilities having the opportunity to respond in writing, we have been transparent regarding our concerns, discussing our concerns with both the facility and the licensing agency. If, depending on the egregiousness of the issues we note, we do, if we need additional assurance, we do obtain additional information as needed from both the facility and the licensing agency. So for example, with Eagle Quest, we did in fact discuss our issues that we noted at the homes with Mr. Doyle and his management team. Mr. Doyle took the opportunity to confirm via email, I believe, that the issues had been addressed and corrected within 2 days of us bringing it to his attention. We subsequently followed up with the licensing agency to obtain their input, and they confirmed the same thing that Mr. Doyle was concerned about. So in this case, we felt that there was no additional response needed by him. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McGurk. I do see I have a question from Senator Don Loop. I'm sorry, Vice Chair, please. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the information. I have a couple of questions. On page 15, where you list the type of work where the survey observations are, almost all of these are 6 months apart. So even if somebody observes something wrong and then sends you an email and says, I've fixed it, is there a follow-up? 6 months is a long time for, and I realize you need staff, and I realize that it's time intensive, but 6 months is a long time. And if all I have to do is email you, like, is there a follow-up so that I know that what's in the email is accurate?
Assemblywoman Dondero Loop. Depending on the egregiousness, yes, we do determine whether we need to go out to the facility sooner rather than later. As you know, we have 59 facilities within the state. We are constantly juggling our resources against the number of facilities we have. Plus, we also are assessing our risk on a very frequent basis. So, for example, for the ones that have more egregious issues, such as P6 Family Services, we do go to them sooner rather than later. And if needed, we get additional information from both the facility themselves and the licensing agency. Hopefully that addresses your concern.
Well, I don't know if it does. I appreciate the answer. I just think that anything with children who are vulnerable is egregious. So, you know, you may find one pill on a floor and that may never happen again, but how do you know it doesn't happen again if there's not consistent follow-up? I guess that would just be one example, but
if I could take the time to address that. The licensing agency are the ones that are responsible for more frequent going in and out of the homes. Our process is a secondary review to make sure everybody's on the same page.
And
And I'm
But-
not saying that nothing is egregious. I'm just trying to weigh things up. So apologies if I misspoke.
And Vice Chair, I believe we do have Cindy Pitlock from the Department of Children and Family Services on here too as well, so we can ask them. I mean, because that's a great question. I'd like to know, in addition to the audits that the audit division provides, how often is DCFS visiting these homes and doing their own inspections?
Hi, for the record, Cindy Pitlock, Administrator, Division of Child and Family Services. Excuse me. So I would like to defer that comment to Lori Jackson, who would be able to answer it more in depth.
Hi, Lori Jackson, Social Services Manager for DCFS. In regards to the report for facilities, Tahoe House was the one that fell under our purview. Tahoe House had significant issues. We worked with licensing. We were there weekly. We had a corrective action plan. It literally until the day that we made the mutual decision that perhaps they should, this was not the field for them and they should close their doors. Does that answer the question? I apologize.
Ms. Jackson, for the license, for those who hold licenses under your purview, how often do you guys inspect their home in addition to what our audit division does?
By statute, the licensing division would go once a year, but when we have children placed in a facility such as Tahoe House, we are seeing that facility monthly. We go with the caseworkers to do that. We also had youth parole children who were placed at Tahoe House, and their youth parole officers were also going and seeing them monthly and reporting back to us, so that we could continually address concerns as we found them or as to follow up to make sure that they were being addressed.
Okay, perfect. And so you just to recap, you said the per NRS you're only required to inspect them once a year, though, correct?
Correct.
And Chair, if I could chime in there. And so when you close Eagle Crest or whoever it may be, is that all their facilities or just that one house?
Lori Jackson, for the record, Tahoe House was a single facility here in Carson, and it was not a chained event. They don't have multiple houses. They had one house here in Carson.
But if I understand you correctly, if a owner had more than one home, you would only close that one. You would only close the home that had the problem.
Lori Jackson, for the record, I would just, for that question, I don't have multiple homes within my jurisdiction. I think Clark representatives and Washer representatives with Eagle Quest have multiple homes. I would think that they might be better to address that.
And Vice Chair, it looks like I know that this fell under the Tahoe House, fell under the Division of Child and Family Services, but I know that one of the facilities that was reviewed, P6, which fell under the Washoe County Human Services jurisdiction, had 2 homes and only one of them was closed after the audit findings. So the other one remained open. So hopefully that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Vice Chair. Sorry, I interrupted your line of questions. I don't know if you were done.
No, it's all good. I was just very concerned that we would allow someone to continue on with their business, if you will, if they have a home that does not have that quality of care that we just, you know, I don't know. It's all good. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And again, might be worth looking at that NRS that only requires 1 annual review of the homes. And I know, and it's an issue we see with all of our state agencies, just not enough people to work within each division. I did have a question, and this might be for Ms. McGuirk or Mr. Crossman. Mr. Crossman, in your remarks, you had mentioned that that the division had received over 600 complaints in 2020. Was that correct?
For the record, Dan Crossman, yes, that is accurate. I believe on page 4 of our report, we highlight that we received and reviewed 629 complaints during the fiscal year.
And Mr. Crossman, I'm curious, do you know if that number, did it increase or decrease from the previous fiscal year?
For the record, Dan Crossman, this was a decrease from the prior year. We do comment on page 4, some of those reasons that we were able to identify, that it's dependent on the type of facility, age of children, number of children placed. And part of that was due to the COVID-19 pandemic and fewer children being placed in those facilities. Ms. McGurk might be able to add a little more context to that, if you wouldn't mind, Sandra.
For the record, Sandra McGurk. I think Mr. Crossman gave a very good synopsis. Due to the COVID-19, I believe this is the biggest impact. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a reduction in the number of children placed in the various types of facilities. So that, in effect, reduced the potential for complaints and grievances to be filed, which is exactly what we saw.
And I'm curious, and this is probably another question for the audit division, but who files the complaints with the audit division? Because these private facilities are under the jurisdiction of DCFS, correct? So wouldn't the complaints go to DCFS, or who calls the audit division to file complaints? Where do those complaints come from?
So there is a specific statute that addresses that item. Each facility that has a child under the custody of a court or otherwise are required to send us copies of complaints, including management's addressing of the issue. So that encapsulates both the private and the public facilities. We do have an internal process where we are following up with the facilities to ensure that we are getting information on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Ms. McGurk. That answered my question completely. And I do have one question, and it's probably for Ms. Pitlock from DCFS. But when the facilities close, or what happens to the children? Are they placed in other homes?
Hi, Cindy Pitlock for the record. Thank you for the question, Chair. So yes, every attempt is made to safely place the youth in another facility. We have established wonderful relationships with our Clark County partners and our Washoe County partners. And when a situation like that happens, we literally tag team together. We get on a staffing call together and solve problems as a collective group. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Pitlock. And my last question is going to be, I know NRS only requires one visit to each facility per year. Do you know if like Washoe County or Clark County, if their regs require more than one visit per year, or are they in line with what the state does? And just
for the record, Cindy Pitlock, I would defer that question to my colleague, Ms. Paoli, that would probably be able to answer it more completely than I would.
Good morning, I'm Kara Paoli. I'm a division director with Washoe County Human Services Agency, for the record. We have the same statutes that we fall under as the state and Clark County. We do have caseworkers that go into the home monthly. That is the requirement. And they're also supposed to do an environmental inspection to make sure that the home is safe and that that medications are locked up, that we have a list of requirements for our providers that not only our licensing team is supposed to use, but our caseworkers as well.
Thank you, Ms. Paoli. And so there is people in the homes monthly.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you jumping in for helping answer the question. Members, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to Gridview. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I would take a motion to approve the report.
I move to approve this last reviewed report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a second? Have a second from Assemblymember Dickman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye by raising your hand. Okay, it looks like the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, members. Okay, our next agenda item is agenda item 6, the report on count of money in the state treasury. I believe we have Ms. Tammy Goetz, audit supervisor, here to present.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Audit Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Tammy Goetz, Audit Supervisor. I would like to present the report of count of money in the state treasury. If you could direct your attention to the transmittal letter page. In accordance with NRS 353.060, we counted the money and securities in the state treasury on Wednesday, June 30th, 2021, and have prepared therefrom Exhibit A with supporting schedules 1 through 3. The legislative auditor is required to count the money in the state treasury at least annually. On the count day, the state treasurer provides a vault inventory listing to perform our physical examination of the vault's contents. The state treasurer also provided a listing of the state's holdings with various financial institutions. We confirmed the state treasurer's account balances directly with these financial institutions and reconciled to the state controller's records and the state's accounting system. In accordance with NRS 353.075, we filed this report with the Secretary of State on January the 10th, 2022. Continuing to page 1 of the money count report is the count of money and securities on June 30th, 2021. There were 173 million on deposit with financial institutions, 7.9 billion of state-owned securities, and 2.5 billion of securities held for safekeeping, for a grand total of over 10.6 billion. Pages 3 through 25 show this exhibit's detail. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Goetz. I'm going to come to the committee. Committee members, any questions for Ms. Goetz? I believe we do also have from the Treasurer's Office. We have Treasurer Zach Conine here, Tara Hagan, and Linda Tobin to answer any questions. Okay. Looks like we have no questions, Ms. Goetz. With that, committee members, I would take a motion to approve the report.
I move to approve the report from the state treasury.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Looks like I had a motion to approve from Vice Chair and a second from Assembly Member Dickman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, members, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Goetz. Okay, committee members, agenda item 7 is a presentation of the 6-month report. I believe before we jump into these, I'm going to go to Mr. Crossman for some brief remarks. Mr. Crossman?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. I'll just provide a brief overview of the 6-month process. This was established in statute many years ago to help ensure that audit recommendations are implemented. I believe it's important to recognize and acknowledge that the follow-up process that was put in place by the Nevada Legislature has been recognized as a best practice by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. And that follow-up process begins with a plan of corrective action. We've talked about that a couple times today. It's prepared by the audited agencies, and that is 60 working days after the report is made public. Statute then requires the director of the Governor's Finance Office, which is completed by the Division of Internal Audits, to submit a report to the legislative auditor 6 months after the plan of corrective action is due. And in that report, they indicate the implementation status of each recommendation after reviewing records with each agency. After we then review and receive those 6-month reports, we continue to work with and monitor the agencies on the recommendations that are not fully implemented. Today's reports include our updates after additional communication with those agencies subsequent to the 6-month reports from the Governor's Finance Office, and our review of other relevant documentation. So with that, I would turn it back to you, Chair, to introduce the first 6-month report, which would be agenda item 7G.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Members, next agenda item is 7G, which is the delivery of treatment services for children with autism. We have Audit Supervisor Jennifer Otto here to give the presentation.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jennifer Otto, Audit Supervisor. In January 2021, we issued an audit report on the delivery of treatment services for children with autism. In October 2021, the Office of Finance indicated on their 6-month report that 8 recommendations were fully implemented and 6 recommendations were partially implemented. After communicating with both the Aging and Disability Services Division and the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, and reviewing relevant documentation, we have found that to date, all but 2 recommendations have been fully implemented. Some of this information was provided subsequent to issuing the letters to the members of the Audit Subcommittee, and as a result, we have modified our questions. The following questions are for agency officials regarding the 2 remaining partially implemented recommendations. The first question is directed to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. For recommendation number 3, regarding claim investigations and the recovery of overpayments, when does DHCFP anticipate the recommendation to be fully implemented? The second question is directed to the Aging and Disability Services Division. For recommendation number 10, the Office of Finance indicated staffing issues prevented full implementation of the recommendation at the time of review. When does ADSD anticipate full implementation of the recommendation?
Thank you, Ms. Oto. And I believe we do have members here from the divisions to answer questions. So why don't we take recommendation number 3 first?
Good morning. This is Dr. Capurro, Deputy Administrator from the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, and I can answer question number 3. Our DHCFP Surveillance and Utilization Review Unit, or SUR unit, anticipates completion of all investigative claims and overpayment recovery by April 30th of 2022. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that the committee might have.
Committee members, any questions? Okay, let's move. We can move on to recommendation number 10. And I believe this question was for ADSD. And I believe we have from Aging and Disability Services Division, Mr. Rob and Ms. Jamie.
Good morning. This is Samantha Jaime for the record. I'm the Health Program Manager for the Autism Treatment Assistance Program. As of today, we have 32 kids waiting for services, and we have a plan to start 13 of them this week. And we have an additional 2 staff starting early April. So we will have this fully implemented by April of 2022. And our new staff that we have coming on board will be able to handle the referrals coming in and continue to reduce our wait times. At the time of our 6-month report, our wait times were 108 days. And as of this week, we're at 52 days, again, with 32 kids waiting. So we'll be fully implemented by the end of April.
Quick question, Ms. Jaime, is 52 days the normal?
That is actually the shortest wait period that we have had. Again, as of August of this year, August of 2021, our wait days are about 108. So this takes into account the referral status, getting all the paperwork, the eligibility documents, and then getting them assigned to a case manager as well. And we've seen that our provider capacity is growing. We've been able to hire significant amount of staff since our positions were unfrozen as of July 2021. So this has helped us to reduce that wait time and get them to a developmental specialist for case management services.
Thank you, Ms. Jaime. Members, any other questions for our presenters from the divisions? Vice Chair Dondera-Luke.
Thank you very much. My question is along the lines as chair. So you have 108 days wait time. It's going to go down, just so I know, so I understand. You say it's going to go down to 52, which is almost 3 months. And we have how many kids in the queue?
Samantha Heine for the record. Thank you, Vice Chair, for that question. So at the time of our 6-month report, our wait days were 108. As of today, they're 52. And so by the end of April, we will have eliminated those wait days with our new staff coming in.
And then when you get to that, I realize more kids come in as you finish up those kids. But at the end of April, when that new staff comes in and you go down to that 58, how long is there ever a catch-up time? Is there ever a time where you don't have 3 months, 36 families that are waiting for help?
Yes, Samantha Heine for the record. Yes, thank you, Vice Chair, for your question. So we are hoping that by April, we will not have any wait time and that our turnaround time will be about a week. So we do get about 80 referrals a month on average right now. And with the hiring of our new staff, including the 2 new that will be starting in April, that will be a good amount of staff to help cover that caseload. And then we do have vacancies that we are looking to fill to continue with that and keep up with that 80-person referral per month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any other questions? Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to approve this 6-month report.
So moved, Chair, to accept this report we just reviewed.
I have a first from Vice Chair, and it looks like Assemblymember Dickman had raised her hand, so I'm going to give her the second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, members, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Looks like the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Otto. Okay, members, agenda item 7H, the Department of Employment, Training and Rehabilitation, Employment Security Division. I believe we have Chief Deputy Legislative Auditor Shannon Rydell here to present. I saw her unmute herself already, so she's ready to go.
I am, thank you. So good morning, Chairwoman of the Audit Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Shannon Rydell. I'm the Chief Deputy Legislative Auditor. And today I will present the 6-month report related to the Employment Security Division. I did have a quick question, Chairwoman Howdegee, on just procedural, how you wanted to go about this. We do have 3 questions. Do you want the agency to provide a response after each question, or would you prefer that I just go through this report and then they answer all 3 questions at once?
Ms. Rydell, since Dieter's going to be answering all 3 questions, why don't we do one at a time?
Okay, great. So in March of 2021, we issued an audit report on the Employment Security Division. So the 6-month report prepared by the Office of Finance in December of 2021 indicated 6 of the 11 recommendations were fully implemented, 2 were partially implemented, and 3 had no action taken. The partially implemented and no action recommendations are noted in your packet and related to payment agreements, correcting collection reports, creating an aged accounts receivable report, utilizing the non-filers report, and developing policies and procedures over the controller's debt offset program. Regarding payment agreements, the Office of Finance indicated the division's revised policies and procedures did not include policies over defaults and considered the recommendation partially implemented because of this. The division provided additional information on March 18th, 2022, that shows policies have been updated to include defaults. As a result, we now consider this recommendation to be fully implemented, and we no longer have a question for the division regarding this recommendation. For recommendation 10, regarding utilizing the controller's debt offset program, the Office of Finance indicated ESD had not developed policies and procedures regarding this process, but they had requested a memorandum of understanding with the controller's office. The division provided an update regarding this recommendation on March 18th, 2022, indicated they are incorporating this recommendation into the new IS system. However, the use of the debt offset program can be implemented without the new system, and we believe the following questions are still applicable and should be addressed by the division. So the first one is, has the division contacted the controller's office and inquired about an estimated completion date for the memorandum of understanding?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rydell. And I believe we have Ms. Linda Parvin. And I see you've come to the screen. Ms. Parvin, did you want to answer the first question?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. Yes, Linda Parvin, Administrator for the Employment Security Division, for the record. And I would like to ask my Chief of Contributions, Jennifer Stagliano, to respond to this question. I believe there we are. Jennifer, is your mic on? Uh-oh. Nancy.
Hi, Chair. This is Broadcast. Can I jump in to assist real quick?
Yes, please. Thank you, Broadcast.
Of course. All right. If you can, on the bottom left of your corner on the screen, there's going to be a mic emoji. You're going to go ahead and click the arrow pointing up. Go ahead and click that, and under select a microphone, try choosing the opposite one. Let's see if that works. We still cannot, unfortunately, hear you. If you can try one more time, next to your microphone, there's going to be an arrow pointing up. Go ahead and click that. And under select a microphone, either there will be a check mark next to same as system or a check mark next to microphone. Go ahead and choose the opposite one. Here, so we do see that they are unmuting at the time. It's just not coming through right now. Did you want to take a short break so we could assist them, or?
I see that, yeah, I do see them highlight up in green. It looks like they're muted now, but yes. Yep, why don't we go into a 2-minute recess?
Okay, thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, committees, members.
Can you hear us now?
No. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Ms. Stagliano, and thank you, Broadcast, for standing by. Members of the committee, I hope you didn't go too far. We are coming back out of our short recess and back into committee. Thank you, Ms. Stagliano. Ms. Stagliano, did you need the question repeated? Oh, and I think we lost you again. Oh,
you hear us?
There you are. Thank you. I might just need to get closer to the microphone.
Okay. I just want to verify. You can hear me?
Correct. Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Stagliano. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Jennifer Stagliano, Chief of Contributions, for the record. In regards to the debt offset program with the Controller's Office, yes, we have made contact with them. We have been dealing with Mrs. Hoover over there, and she has indicated that we are not eligible to participate in that offset program. So at this point, we can't really proceed with that.
Okay. Was there any other, solutions for recommendation 10 then from the division?
Our understanding is that it's going to be implemented in the RFP for a new system. That was the final decision made.
Okay, and through that RFP system, then there will be a development of policies and procedures to identify employers with delinquent accounts. That will be part of the RFP system.
And the identification of the delinquent accounts is already something that's been placed. We have been identifying those through queries run through our IT department. So that actually is already implemented. It's just the controller's office assistance with that debt offset program that we cannot implement.
Interception. Ms. Rydell, would that satisfy the recommendation?
Yeah, I suppose we will have to reach out to the controller's office and find out what's preventing them from being able to do that. It was our understanding at the time of the audit that that would be something that could be done. So we'll reach out to the controller's office and find out what the hiccup is there, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rydell. And Ms. Rydell, did you want to continue with the next question?
Yeah, so I suppose question number 2 is not applicable at the moment until we find out more information from the controller's office. So I'll just move on to the 3rd question, and that relates to recommendations with no action. And these included those related to correcting erroneous collection reports, creating an aged accounts receivable report, and utilizing the non-filers report to assist in prioritizing accounts and collection efforts. The division has not taken any action on these recommendations because they plan on incorporating them into the RFP for the new system. However, the Office of Finance questioned whether action on the non-filers report should be deferred until the new system is completed. Our audit indicated the non-filer report can be utilized to proactively engage in early collection efforts as tax liabilities typically exist, regardless of whether employers file tax returns. The division did provide an update on March 18th, 2022, stating that they are working to develop a system query to identify non-filers. However, the division had an existing non-filers report during the audit. So therefore, we still think this last question is applicable. And that was, why doesn't the division utilize the current non-filers report?
Ms. Parvin?
Again, I know that I've spoken with Ms. Stagliano and she should be able to respond to this question.
Okay. Ms. Stagliano?
Jennifer Stagliano, Chief of Contributions for the record. We are currently utilizing the non-filers report. We just have this query updated so that we can continue updating our processes on identifying these non-filers and reaching out for those reports. We're also doing some cross matches on those to see which ones are true non-filers because of no payroll versus which ones should be filing or not. So we are currently working on that. In addition to that, we are working with the process improvement team on updating those efforts until the implementation of the new system takes place.
Okay, then so then I can just to confirm, then the recommendation was taken and you guys are using the current non-filers report. Correct. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Any other questions?
No, that completes this 6-month report.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, I would take a motion to approve the 6-month report.
I move to approve the 6-month report.
Motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second? I have a second by Assemblymember Dickman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I would ask all members voting in the aye to raise their hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7I, the Department of Business and Industry, Division of Insurance. We have Deputy Legislator Auditor Amanda Barlow here to make the 6-month report, to give the 6-month report.
Thank you. For the record, Amanda Barlow, Deputy Legislative Auditor. In May 2021, we issued an audit report for the Division of Insurance. The 6-month report prepared by the Office of Finance indicated that 5 recommendations were partially implemented and 2 recommendations have no action. We contacted the division in February of 2022 regarding the status of the recommendations. Based on further discussion with the division, we believe that the division fully implemented recommendation number 5 regarding the storage and handling of personally identifiable information. We have 2 questions for the agency. First, what progress have you made towards fully implementing the remaining 6 recommendations? And second, what is your timeline for full implementation?
Thank you, Ms. Barlow. And I do believe we have Commissioner Richardson here to answer questions. And if we could just,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I believe we have, or do we have Director Reynolds, who's going to be answering on behalf of the Division of Insurance?
So this is Barbara Richardson for the record. I believe I am, as well as our Chief Deputy, Stephanie McGee. So I think that's where the deputy comes in.
Okay.
So first I want to thank Chair Aldegui and the newly appointed Vice Chair Dondero Loop and members of the Audit Committee. Again, for the record, my name is Barb Richardson. I'm the Insurance Commissioner for the state. And I do want to thank the auditing team, as their input has been very helpful, not only at the beginning of the report, but as we continue to work through completing all the open topics that have been presented in the report. The division is continuing to make progress towards full and final implementation on all of the open questions, and we believe we will do so within the next 6 months. But I wanted to make sure to introduce the division's Chief Deputy, Stephanie McGee, who's available online with me to respond to any specific questions on any of the items that are open.
Okay, thank you. And so again, you're working towards full implementation and you think you will have them all fully implemented by within 6 months?
For the record, this is Barb Richardson. That is our plan, yes.
Okay, are any of the outstanding 6 recommendations, will they be done before? I know.
For the record, yes, but I'll let Deputy McGee answer if she knows specifically which ones.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, this is Stephanie McGee, Chief Deputy Insurance Commissioner. I certainly wanted to, while we're here, express my appreciation for the auditors, and both the Legislative Council Bureau auditors and the Division of Internal Audit auditors were professional and really helped us to review and improve our processes. So we really appreciate that. I would suggest that because some of these processes have been developed through the course of the audit and since that final report was issued, it's possible that we will have some of them done before the 6-month period. The concern is that because some of them are segregation of duties and certain things that need to be tested as well, we want to make sure that we've got an opportunity to fully finalize the development, implement, and test all of those procedures. So we were suggesting a September 30 date.
Okay, and Ms. McGee, I will just ask on the 2 items that have no action, has any action been taken? And that was on recommendation number 4 to revise policies and procedures regarding the assessment, collection, and tracking of late fees. And then recommendation number 7, which was impose penalties in accordance with the statute for continued non-compliance. So those 2 had were no action taken whatsoever. Has there been any action on those 2 items?
Yes, there has been action. Stephanie McGee, for the record. The division was working to review all, so the recommendation 4, which was the no action, was talking about the collection of late fees. And that recommendation required us to review and really get into depth on all potential late fees and penalties that the division could impose. So we're working with that. I met with the Division of Internal Audits recently to discuss what we were lacking in those policies and procedures in order to get those things implemented. So with respect to the accounting one, that one I think it's just a matter of finalizing those procedures and making sure that what we're actually doing is reflected in the policy. With respect to recommendation 7, recommendation 7 has to do with imposing penalties for continued non-compliance by the bail industry based upon our project, which was an educational project to review the bail industry. Part of knowing that there's continued non-compliance will require us to continue with that project. So we did the initial audits, then there was COVID, and now we've continued with our project to educate the bail industry and follow up on their compliance with regulations and statutes. So I would suspect that one, I could say that no, there hasn't been any further action on those other than the those cases where we have determined that there is continued noncompliance or noncompliance after additional reviews, I'll put it that way, is those have been referred to our enforcement team. The enforcement team finds that that is in fact the case, then those will be referred to the legal section for action.
Thank you, Ms. McGee. I appreciate you being here and answering those questions. I'm going to look to the committee members. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, then I would accept a motion to approve the 6-month report.
I move to approve the 6-month report.
We have a motion by Vice Chair. Do we have a second? Second by Assemblymember Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, members, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Okay, looks like the motion passes unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is agenda item 7J, which is a 6-month report from the Department of Business and Industry Real Estate Division. And we have Audit Supervisor Todd Peterson here to present the report.
Thank you. For the record, Todd Peterson, Audit Supervisor. Good morning, Chair and members of the subcommittee. In September of 2020, we issued an audit report on the Real Estate Division of the Department of Business and Industry. The audit report contained 14 recommendations. The division filed its plan for corrective action in December of 2020, and then the Governor's Office of Finance issued a 6-month report regarding the implementation status of the 14 recommendations on June 3rd, 2021. At that time, the Office of Finance indicated 4 recommendations were fully implemented, 7 recommendations were partially implemented, and 3 recommendations had no action taken. In our letter to the subcommittee, we have listed those recommendations identified as partially implemented or had no action taken. For the partially implemented recommendations, the Office of Finance indicated action was taken by the division, but sufficient documentation was not available to confirm their full implementation. We contacted the division in February 2022 and requested additional information regarding the status of the 10 remaining recommendations. After reviewing additional information and documentation provided by the division, we have determined 6 of the 10 recommendations have now been fully implemented. Those recommendations still outstanding include recommendations 1, 9, 10, and 12. For recommendation number 1, the division indicated it evaluated user roles and performed updates to its database that would allow it to segregate staff duties through defined levels of access for user roles. However, staff turnover in the division's IT section has prevented it from implementing these levels of access. The division intends to implement levels of access once it obtains the appropriate IT staff. For recommendation number 9, the division indicated new software would be needed to implement the recommendation. The division indicated it is currently in the process of purchasing a new system and plans to integrate the tracking and reconciliation process into the new system. So related to these 2 recommendations, we have 2 questions. The first one for recommendation number 1, when does the division anticipate proper segregation of duties will be achieved for users of its database?
And with the Department of Business and Industry Real Estate Division, I believe we have Sharath Chandra and then Director Terry Reynolds as well.
Morning, Madam Chair. Sharath Chandra, Administrator for the Real Estate Division. Thank you to you and Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Also wanted to thank Mr. Peterson for his hard work working with us throughout the audit process, and also Mr. Crossman. So just to address those 2 questions, we've already done the hard work of finding out the segregation of the duties. Just so that the committee is clear, there are segregated duties are being performed. It wasn't done to the level that we would like to, and basically that was the recommendation or understanding of it. So now that we have all the duties kind of segregated in the right ways because of the new updates, we're now ready to kind of implement it. I think we had, again, IT turnover, we've had a lot of staff turnover, as is the case in many agencies. And I think it's just a matter of finding the staffing, and then once that's done, working with the vendor and the section managers to just identify those levels of access and then kind of define what they are. And when someone reaches that level of access, what's the next step? Just those technical things have to be rolled out. And I don't anticipate that being much of a problem. It's a timing thing. We just have been short-staffed, and vacant positions have resulted in us not being able to implement it. And I think that there's a follow-up to that question too. The second question was, when does the division anticipate its new software? So the recommendation, if my understanding is correct, was utilize the database to track trust account reconciliations submittal for all licensed real estate brokers. So there is a process in place. The process is not in the system. We understand that the auditors, when they looked at it, the process that we had was a little disjointed, and the ideal process would be to actually use the system of record to perform these audits and input the information in there so we could pull the appropriate reports. And Madam Chair, I'm preaching to the choir. You know how old our system is, and so some of the things that we want to do can't be done in the system, and so we're using Excel and other couple of mechanisms to do it. And so we are in the process of obtaining new software, and it's a long process. It's a request for information, then a better selection, and then actually working through the contract and then awarding the contract. So we are in the process of vendor selection right now, and so we anticipate getting a vendor selected and get into contract negotiations before the end of the fiscal year, end of June, and then hopefully vendor will start working on the software. So that's the timeline on getting new software. The goal for us is to clearly, all our operations need to work through that software, whether it's audit, whether it's compliance, whether it's licensing. And so that's the goal. And so that's to answer the second question on that audit finding. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll stop for questions if you have any.
Yes, and then Mr. Peterson, before I turn it back over to you, I do have a question for Administrator Chandra. So then it sounds like question number one is the segregation of duties has already been achieved, but so is there an RFP out because you're for the software system right now? Because you're saying you guys hope to have it secured by June 2020. So a software system has not yet been selected.
So all the RFP process has been done. Okay. I think we've identified the vendors, we've had vendor presentations, and now it's just a matter of whittling it down to the top two and then making a selection. And then we get into actually working through the mechanics of the contract, and then it would go for approval to the boards, and then the vendor would be awarded the contract. So RFP, all that process is done. Now we're just a matter of assessing what's been submitted and then going through the selection process.
And you're hoping to have that selection process completely completed by June 2022.
That's correct. And so, yeah, and then that gives them enough time to then work through actually implementing the software, going through everything that would be required to implement a new licensing software. Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Peterson, I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Howdy. For the record, Todd Peterson, Audit Supervisor. For recommendations 10 and 12, the division indicated it accepted and fully understands the basis for the recommendations, but reported it has significant constraints in fiscal staff and technology resources to fully implement these recommendations. The division mentioned one administrative position was dedicated to trust account and administrative duties, with trust account responsibilities taking approximately 10 working days each month. Furthermore, the division indicated it would require an auditor or similar position, along with some technology enhancements to implement the recommendations. And we'd just like to note that the audit division, we didn't use any special technology to evaluate broker trust account information as part of the audit. Our testing included the use of the division's desk review guidelines to examine and identify any errors on trust account reconciliation information already submitted to the division. Moreover, the errors we identified during our testing of broker trust account documentation, like nondescript journal entries, incomplete bank statements, and deposits listed as unknown, and suspicious withdrawals, were easily identifiable by just scanning broker trust account documentation. Finally, the audit recommendations as written do not call for a review of all broker trust account information. Instead, we recommend a risk-based approach. This builds upon the process the division should be following based on its desk review guidelines. So with that information, we have one question for the division regarding recommendations 10 and 12, which relate to trust accounts and statutory requirements that brokers file, and the division review those trust account reconciliations. And our question is, does the division intend to take any action to implement these recommendations? And when does it intend to take this action?
Administrator?
Madam Chair, thank you. Again, like Mr. Peterson said, we do understand the recommendations and the kind of the genesis of what these requirements are. Again, 10 and 12, they're trust account reconciliations. And if you recall, Madam Chair, I think we had this discussion at the last meeting too. So every broker is supposed to turn in a trust account reconciliation, whether they do it or whether they have trust accounts or they don't. And so originally our risk-based approach was based on, because of historically the division staffing levels and our ability to monitor all these brokers, the question was, we identified a segment of brokers that do use trust account reconciliations. And within that section of trust account reconciliations, we then focused on the folks that actually used property management to do those trust account reconciliations. So after the audit, we stepped back and we said, okay, well, let's implement it across the board, because the risk-based approach may have been too narrow in scope, at least our interpretation of a risk-based approach. So we stepped back and we said, we will start requiring everybody, we'll monitor everybody to submit trust account reconciliations, whether they have it or they don't. So there are two forms. And so you would submit a form saying you don't have a trust account reconciliation, and we would file that. And then the other process is you would say you do have one, and then you would submit this form that the division requires. And so we've now done that across all brokers, as opposed to just ones with property management permits. So that was the first step. The second one was really, how deep do you go into these trust account reconciliations? And this is where I think we have a process in place. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I have an administrative 3 position doing a lot of this work. And so the question became, well, how much am I expecting an administrative 3 person, in addition to their regular duties, perform trust account reconciliations? And the goal is to give our employees the tools, but also we want to adequately find the right fit. You either want someone with some auditing experience or something to be able to make determinations across the board. And so we've made some changes currently, and I think we're in a good place. It's just if we want to take this to a more dedicated risk-based approach, where you would evaluate a previous year's trust account reconciliation with this one's, cross-reference some stuff, go through different sections. It is time consuming. And so I think that's where we said it's a resource issue. Again, we would love to do this implementation and have someone in place that could dedicate the time to do this. But I think that's the dilemma. I think we'll work within the framework of what we have. And I think we are in the process of re-reviewing how these trust account reconciliations are done by the AA3. We've reviewed their procedures. I believe we could improve on it. And I think that's kind of the direction that we're going in.
I do want to ask, Mr. Patterson, would that be enough to satisfy the recommendation?
For the record, Todd Peterson, audit supervisor. In my opinion, this would be a question for Mr. Crossman, I think this would be something that we would want to continue to monitor the implementation of these two recommendations. Our question as to whether or not they would take any action came from their responses and the Division of Internal Audit's review during the 6-month report that no action has been taken on these recommendations. So in my opinion, I think this would be something we would want to follow up and see that there is some action taken so that these broker trust accounts can be properly monitored.
And so would this be in the form, like if monitoring these recommendations, would that require, would we get to see these an update in a future audit subcommittee meeting?
For the record, Todd Peterson, I'll turn that over to Mr. Crossman.
Sorry, stepped on you there, Mr. Peterson. For the record, Dan Crossman, Legislative Auditor. As far as going forward, I would concur with Mr. Peterson's assessment that I'd like to continue to monitor that recommendation, or these recommendations that fall under this question. As far as from a process standpoint, this is officially the last time we would discuss the 6-month reports, unless it was the desire of the chair to have us come back and present some additional information in the future. And that has been done in the past. So I would defer to Chair Howdegee and members of the subcommittee if they'd like to have an update on this or any of the other 6-month reports that we've heard today. We're happy to bring them back at a future meeting. We do continue to monitor all these recommendations, regardless of whether or not they're coming to another meeting. But that would be the process, would be just letting us know that you would like to have them back at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, members, any other questions for, let me come into a grid view so I can see everyone. Members, any questions? Okay, well then with that, I would accept a motion to approve the 6-month report.
I move to accept the 6-month report.
Second by Assemblywoman Miller. Thank you so much, members. I have a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify aye by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Mr. Peterson, for the presentation. Okay, and thank you so much, Administrator Chandra, for being with us to answer the questions. I appreciate that. Okay, that concludes agenda item number 7. From committee members, we can move on to agenda item number 8, which is the National State Auditors Association report on the Nevada Legislative Council Bureau's Audit Division System of Quality Control. We have Mr. Crossman here to make a brief presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I know at this point in the meeting, everyone's had a lot of fun, so I'll make this as brief as I can. But I think this is a really important item to highlight. You should have in your packet a letter from the National State Auditors Association addressed to my office entitled the Peer Review Report. This report answers that question that few ask, but many wonder: who audits the auditors? Well, the answer to that question is we are audited by experienced auditors from other states. The Audit Division performs our audits in accordance with very rigorous auditing standards, and those standards require that every 3 years, the division be subjected to an external peer review. Experienced auditors from the states of Wyoming, North Dakota, Georgia, and Louisiana conducted this most recent peer review, which occurred in the fall. The peer review concluded that the Audit Division's system of quality control provided reasonable assurance of conformity with government auditing standards and issued a rating of pass, which is the highest rating. I have to clarify that because pass doesn't sound great, but that is the highest rating they provide. I'm extremely proud of my team and their dedication and all that goes into the audit process. There is a lot that goes in behind the scenes to come up with a relatively short report. So I'd like to thank all of them for all their hard work and dedication to our processes, which resulted in a good pat on the back for our office for doing the job in the way that we are instructed to, following the standards that we must follow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. I do have a handful of questions for you. I'm going to go to the members first. Members, any questions? Okay, I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you to you and the entire audit division for your service. Like you said, I think a pass is the highest grade you can receive, which is great. And then I also want to thank you guys and take a moment to acknowledge that, like you said, that we are a model. Your division is a model for the 6-month review and in the way they conduct their audit follow-up. So thank you guys for all that you do in keeping our state functioning. Okay, members, that is a no action item. So that is the second to the last agenda item. Our last agenda item is public comment. So agenda item 9. I do want to pause just for a few moments to give those who may be listening time to call in. Again, remember, we do have 4 ways you can submit public comment. You can call in, mail in your public comment, email in your public comment, or fax in your public comment. You will find all forms on the methods of sending your public comments in on the agenda. But for those who are calling in, we will just give them a moment. Okay, BPS, can we go to our first caller for public comment?
Yes, and thank you, Chair Howdy. To provide public comment at this time, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller 210, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Howdy and members of the committee. My name is Mary Nakashima, and I'm representing Perkins Company and our client, the Family Focused Treatment Association, or FFTA. I know it's been a long day, and we just wanted to offer our thanks to both the members and the staff who have worked together to put today's hearing together. Just to reiterate, the FFTA represents most of Nevada's specialized foster care providers. Our members are nationally accredited providers, and only one member was mentioned today in a deficiency, which was Eagle Quest. The other called out members in item 5 are not members of the association. I did want to clarify for the record that none of Eagle Quest homes were closed as a result of this or any other audit. I'm calling today because I wanted to reiterate that we take this and all legislative work very seriously. And anytime a provider is called into question in a public or written forum, we'd appreciate the ability to provide an unedited response. We know just from past experience that communication is essential between private partners who open their homes to youth during likely the most difficult time in their adolescence, and government partners who review those facilities. Our members have had a transparent relationship with state and local officials, and we're really hopeful to continue that, as we know it's in the best interest of all children. We understand that based on testimony that the Eagle Quest findings were cleared via brief email, but again, we take this body's work very seriously and just have some concerns that any deficiencies would be presented to an elected body in a public forum with limited notice. Our membership seeks to address all concerns in an expedited manner, as that's, again, in the best interest of the child, and we're confident that any findings were addressed. At this time, we still have not seen the report, but we'll continue to check the website now that it's been adopted. And should this committee request a response, or the auditors would be obviously happy to provide that. Thanks again for the work that you do for both our elected officials and the public servants who work within the division.
Thank you, broadcast. Next caller, please.
Thank you, Chair. If you've recently joined the call and would like to provide public comment at this time, please press star 9 on your phone or raise hand in your Zoom window to take your place in the queue. And you are unmuted. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Assembly. My name is Fatai Langi, and I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Three Angels Care. I am a resource parent to 4 foster youth, biological parent to 3 beautiful boys, director for Three Angels Care, also do some nonprofit work, family coach, and a preservation advocate for family and anybody that's impacted by the foster care system. Now, these are just a few of the different hats that I juggle on a daily basis. However, it is a lifestyle. Everything foster care and preservation is what I breathe day in and day out. My family and I have been a resource family for a decade and have seen so many. That was my timer reminding me of my time. My resource family we've been doing this work for a decade and have seen so many changes, both good and learning ones that challenge us in the continuation of our calling. That is changing this world by modeling unconditional love to foster youth and at-risk youth so they have an opportunity to change their narrative. Our calling has expanded to the foster children and their parents, caregivers, because the trend we have experienced is a generational challenge. Kids we care for now and in the past are second, third, and even fourth generation products of foster care. I have always been a firm believer that this lane of impact is not for everyone and that it is a purpose calling. A calling that creates vulnerability and transparency so that it promotes growth, transformation, and collaboration. This does not come into fruition. This actually didn't come into fruition until the pandemic took place, and it forced a lot of professionals to work from home, log in on Zoom, homeschool their kids, not look their best on Zoom calls, dogs barking in the background, forced to share a workspace at home with their spouses and constantly saying, I'm sorry, my kids are home, I may get interrupted, or my connection is not the best. I experienced these transitions with my licensing agency these past 2 years in which it has promoted connection, effective communication, and collaboration. Our partnership relationship with our licensing agency didn't happen overnight. Just like in any other relationship of getting to know people, you are liked until something wrong happens. And then comes the questioning and some judgment. But I'm grateful for the NAS, NRC, QPI, and all the other alphabet regulations to help hold each other accountable to the partnership. I just wanted to highlight this experience that we had because this is really where we saw the strengthening of our relationship. And it was due to a loss of one of our 3 Angels Care admin staff, which created an opportunity for cultural awareness to take place. We had 3 or 4 Washoe County Human Service Agency workers attend the funeral service during social distancing and mass mandate moments, and that support spoke kindness and empathy. It gave me a perspective to life that although we all have a goal to accomplish daily for kids in the foster care system, my need at that moment of mourning and sadness was important too. Cultural awareness, I feel, needs to be a training that all people in this lane of impact need to consider, very important for the development of our foster children and our resource families. Recently, my agency had an unannounced visit from LCB, and a comment that was made to one of the adults in the home was, "Did you just clean your house?" You can only imagine the confusion and insult that it possibly could have left the adult, as her motto is cleanliness is next to godliness. I appreciate, and Sandra knows this, I value her work so much, as it has ensured safety for our foster children. It's kept me accountable for sure. However, some of the recent experiences have been uncomfortable for our foster youth. It was the first time that LCB showed up and our foster youth was home as well. In one visit, at one visit of one of our resource family homes, the foster youth did not know or wasn't really aware who LCB was and was concerned that they were going to be separated from the family. They continued saying they were scared because they'd never seen them before. After the adult explained to the youth who LCB was, it gave them a little assurance knowing their placement was not going to be interrupted or impacted. We have experienced other challenges where unannounced visits happened and the resource family was not available for a walkthrough because they work day jobs. I am hoping there can be other ideas in collaboration so that the availability of my resource families does not delay the work of LCB. I appreciate the auditors so much for their feedback as it has helped us with the growth for the agency and also reassure safety is always the top need. In closing, I want to thank my licensing agency, Washoe County Human Service Agency, for their continued support and partnership to ensure safety for all people involved, including children, resource family, and also community support that have a heart for this work. When the adults doing this work is being supported, the children in our foster care system thrive and have an opportunity to rewrite their story. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Broadcast, do we have anyone else on the telephone line for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Haddocky. The public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge that there are great facilities in our state doing work to keep our children safe. And there are so many great facilities, but the job of the audit division is to highlight the issues. And so that's what we hear. And unfortunately, you know, we're not here to hear about all the great work sometimes that does get done in these private facilities. And we're here just to highlight some of the issues that are found, but that's not to take away from any of the facilities that are doing a great job and out there doing the work to keep our children safe. Committee members, with that was our last agenda item. I do want to let you know that our next meeting will be scheduled for May 4th. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, committee members, and thank you, Audit Division, and all those state agencies who were here to answer questions and those who gave public comment. Thank you.